Japan, in Korea, in China. So you see that there's more diversity. Okay? The thing is that if they interact, maintaining their individuality, we have this heterogeneization. The thing is that sometimes when two cultures meet, or two aspects of the culture meet, they might blend, mix, and something new might emerge. So I mentioned, for example, tango in Argentina. Lunfardo, I was going to have tango, and then say tango fusion. Tango fusion is a blend of tango and electronic music. And that is not heterogeneization, but hybridization. Yes, because you have a blend of two cultures, or two aspects of a culture, and something new. Yes, and these cultural effects will be the focus of the class with Consuelo. So you will work with more explanations with Consuelo. But if you see, Schultz is quite moderate in his explanations about globalization. He tries to show you the positive, the negative, yes, all the aspects of globalization. Yes, he doesn't take a particular one or the other. And then sometimes we tend to associate, for example, homogenization as something negative. Yes, but he says, well, it can be negative because it can lead to the disappearance of different cultures, languages. Yes, but he says it can be also positive because, for example, today English is a lingua franca. You can go to another part of the world and communicate in English. Well, in that case, it was quite positive. So it always depends on how you analyze. And as opposed to Costa Picasso, he said globalization is not necessarily homogenization. Yeah? There are other cultural effects. Okay? That's why he said we cannot define globalization as universalization or westernization. Okay? Globalization is something more. It is territoriality. Let's see Friedman. Friedman also adds a new insight. His new insight to the definition of globalization is this idea of the flat world. What does Friedman say about the flat world? What does it mean?
That the barriers are lower now.
Okay, but you could say, well, with liberalization, the barrier.
That there is a position of horizontality now with the relationship between people. It's no longer about unification, but more about connection along the same lines.
Okay, horizontalism, yes.
That thanks to technology and the internet, where everybody has the same opportunities to grow.
Okay, so he says the flat world, or the flattening of the world, means that thanks to globalization, the playing field has been left. So everybody, as he said, now thanks to the developments in technology and the internet, everybody can do what? And he uses three words. Everybody can
Connect,
collaborate,
collaborate, compete.
and compete. Yes, because the playing field has been left. Yeah, thanks to the different developments in technology. So he refers to the internet, or he refers to the different forces that have flattened the world. That you can read about the forces, but they actually have to do with these developments in technology and telecommunications. And these technologies have empowered who? The individual. Okay, so he says the agent of globalization in this flat world is the individual. It is the individual, the one who can connect, because before it was maybe quite difficult for an individual to compete on a global scale. But today, thanks to this flat world, the individual can connect. And this is something that maybe you are experiencing. For example, with LinkedIn. You connect, you enter your information, then you compete with others, and when you're hired, you collaborate with others, but as individuals. So individuals are the ones that are empowered in this flat world. Okay? That's why it says the individual. The focus in this, what he called era 3.0 of globalization, the agent of globalization, is the individual. And what about Costa Picasso? And Costa Picasso, well, we didn't mention this, but where is Costa Picasso from?
Okay.
Argentina. Friedman, the
USA.
US,
Okay.
and Scholti.
The Netherlands.
Okay, the Netherlands, he teaches in the Netherlands, also in Sweden, so Western Europe. Okay, so where that person is also influences their ideas of globalization. You have Scholti, more moderate, yes. Maybe Friedman, when he produced that work, he was mainly praising globalization, but if you saw his last interview, he also presented some criticism. And then Costa Picasso, what is his position in relation to globalization?
He's against it.
He's against it or criticizes, yes, he sees the negative of globalization. And maybe that is because he's speaking from a developing country, yes, and not from the north. Okay? So Costa Picasso defines globalization as Americanization. Yes. Why? What does he say about globalization? Yes.
He says that the driving force of globalization is capitalism, and that will leads to McDonaldization.
Very good. So, when we say Americanization, I mentioned that it's related to one of the cultural effects of globalization, according to Scholti. Okay? Because he says that globalization would be cultural homogenization, yes, that he equates that homogenization to Americanization, and then he uses this negative perspective, calling it demonization. Okay? So he said that globalization would be the expansion of the American way of life. And everything that is related to the American way of life. Materialism, capitalism, yes, and everything that is related to it. So maybe you could say, well, he defines this as cultural homogenization, that is not positive or negative, but then he says Americanization, the spread of the American model, and then he uses McDonaldization, then he says, well, criticizing. Yes, very good. So he criticizes globalization, so to counterbalance globalization, he proposes multiculturalism. Okay? Because he says, if globalization leads to homogenization and the imposition of the American model, multiculturalism leads to diversity. Yes, it relates to heterogenization. Leads to diversity and their respect for differences. You're not trying to impose one culture over the other, but there is this respect for diversity. Okay? Very good. So that is Costa Picasso. And something that I forgot, that I'm bringing out, in relation to Scholti, when he speaks about the separate territorial relations, he says that these relations have two qualities. Which are the two qualities of separate territorial relations? Yes. I give you an example and the words will come. For example, I don't know if you follow Colapinto on the F1. Okay. Yes?
Yes.
My husband.
Your
Yes.
husband.
Never in his life saw Formula 1. Now, every Sunday, we have to watch Formula
The
1.
race. The
Okay.
race of Formula 1.
So, for example, Colapinto last Sunday he ran in Belgium.
Yes.
No, in Hungary.
In Hungary.
In Hungary. Okay, so you, yes, here in Argentina, could watch the race on TV. And someone in Abu Dhabi at the same time could also watch the race. So if I here in Argentina, someone in Abu Dhabi, someone in China, someone in the United States, everybody were watching the race at the same time, her husband here in Córdoba. So how do you call that? If everybody at the same time are watching the same event.
Instantaneous.
Simultaneous.
Simultaneous.
I'm sorry. Simultaneous. Yes. And also, it is instantaneous because while he was racing, you were watching it. Not that you watch it the following day. At the same time. So the connection was instantaneous. Okay? So that is what characterizes relations today, the separate territorial relations today. Simultaneity and instantaneity. According to Schultz.
Yes, I just wanted to say that the Connie said live transmission.
Okay.
Yes, the one is a light
Yeah.
transmission.
The light transmission and something that was taking place 3,000 meters.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. Everybody was on.
45,000 people watching at the same time when people were
And interacting.
interacting.
Because there is this social connection, social relation that is separate territorial because we weren't there. And in fact, the people from Conisen weren't there, down there. Yes, they were on ship. Okay? So again, this is thanks to the technology.
And also the fact that the Connie said researchers are working with for an American company or in collaboration with
In
an
collaboration with, yes, all the equipment comes from an American company. Okay? So that collaboration is possible thanks to this globalization. Okay? Very good. So I think that you can understand globalization because you're living this. Yes, this globalization. And you were born in this globalization. Okay? But even though you were born in this separate relations that word, let's see something in relation to the origin or the history of globalization. Okay? And different authors, depending on how they what they understand by globalization, provide different periodization to globalization. And actually, Schultz and Friedman refer to different eras of globalization. And they say, well, actually, there are three main eras of globalization. I will provide this one because we don't have the material, and then we will work together. Okay? So, according to Schulte, the first era of globalization, he calls this as intimation of globalization, hints of globalization, signs of globalization in English. And he says that these first signs of globalization were experienced before the 19th century. Okay? That is the period of this first period of globalization for sure. So all the period before the 19th century. Yes? And this period before the 19th century was characterized by this emergence of this global imagination, global consciousness. People began to have this global consciousness. So this, I don't know if you can read, but it says globality existed inside the mind. Okay, and in fact, the noun globe, and this is in the material, yes, dates from the 15th century. And then the noun globe having this spherical shape some centuries later. So at the very beginning, this idea of globality existed in the mind. And he says, if we understand, because he says, up to the 19th century, because it's very difficult to assign a starting point to globalization. He says it would be quite arbitrary to say this is the first global act. It's very difficult because he says if we understand globalization as trans-world connections of people from different countries, those trans-world connections are as old as man. He says, think about the first civilizations. Think about culture one with the Iberians moving, the Celts moving, trade in the known world, remember, with China and the Mediterranean. So there was trans-world connection. Okay, so that trans-world connection was not good. Yes? And the difference with other eras of globalization is, for example, that trade was restricted to a small amount of items. Some companies are the ones that trade, yes? And also this global imagination, this global consciousness touched just a few minds. Not that everybody was aware of this idea of the global. Think about the time, yeah, think about the communications at that time. Not everybody had this idea of a word, global, okay, as a single space. So, and that's why he said it is this emergence of this global imagination. They are signs of globality, yes, up until the 19th century. Now, the second era of globalization is what he calls incipient globalization, and it is from the 1850s to the 1950s, more or less. will we see in this incipient globalization? This, the first global telecommunications technology. So we see trans-world postal services. You could send now letters to somebody, yes, to another continent. We see transoceanic telegraphic lines. We see the emergence of the telephone. So there were international telephone connections, yes, connections between countries. So we see a growth of global communication technology, or the first global telecommunications technology. The things that they started more or less in the 1850s, and then in the 1950s they grew even more, yes, with more development, yes. And also during this time there was a growth of global markets, yes, because international trade was not new by this day, yes. America has already been discovered, so transoceanic trade had already started, but now we see a growth and a consolidation of these global markets, and also the creation of different global organizations such as the League of Nations, for example. It was created during this period. So we see a growth of all this idea of the global experience. And then the third era of globalization is the one that we are experiencing today. And for sure it started in the 60s onwards, in the 60s with the developments in technology. Yes. Until today, and this is what is called the full-scale globalization. Okay? And what are the characteristics of this full-scale globalization? Is that this process of globalization accelerated during this period. That's why it is full-scale, yes. And there were developments in global communication technologies. There were further growth in global markets. More global organizations were created. And this is what characterizes full-scale globalization is this, the growth of supra-territorial relations or supra-territorial connections. Okay? And something very important, remember that I told you that in the first year of globalization, this global consciousness touched every mind. But now we have this growth of this global consciousness after the 60s. And he says, in chapter 4, he said, no numerical measures of global consciousness are available. You cannot say, well, 5 million people have this global consciousness. It's very difficult. However, it seems safe to venture that people today are generally more aware than ever that the planet is a single. Okay? So this perception, this is the global consciousness, the perception of the planet as a single space. Yes? So people today are more aware of that. Maybe not everybody, yes, it cannot be categorical, but most people would say have this global consciousness. Okay? So this is short. Now I will give you some minutes, yes, to work with Friedman and the era of globalization. And when you write down ideas, take into account the period. You are going to see that there are some differences with regard to the period. The size of the world, it refers to the size of the world, and people. This to let you know. When he speaks about the flattening of the world, or the world shrinking from small to tiny, for example, those are men. Okay? Because if you enter the video, one of the interviews, people mistake the flat world with Friedman being a flat earth, or thermodynamic man, and that is not the case. Okay? He uses the flat world as a main this word of connection and collaboration. Yes? So, the size of the world, which is the dynamic force, and who is the agent of globalization. I give you 5 minutes.
Estoy viviendo. ¿Ah? No, pasaba muy temprano.
Now, Thomas Friedman, the first era of globalization gives a name to the first era of globalization. It's globalization 1.0. 1.0. And what is it? Discovery of America, so 1492 up until more or less 1800s.
¿Qué decimos, guacho?
So they coincide in the end. Yeah, but not only a sign.
Me queda ahí.
What can you tell me about the size of the world? What happened to the world? He said the world shrunk. From large to medium. And what made the world shrunk? Trade. Okay, global trade. So an increasing trade or an increasing connection. Yes, there is an increasing connections here. So that's why I say this is metaphorical. It's not the word small. Metaphorically speaking, for us, it shrunk because now people there were increased connections. Yes, among different areas. Now, which is the dynamic force? Which was the dynamic force?
Getting more resources or more
Well,
power?
sorry, Julieta.
Getting more resources or more power?
Well, but that is not the drive, the dynamic force. No, that is the agent. Ships.
The wind.
The wind. He mentions the wind because remember, in the beginning of globalization, in the discovery of America, 1492, how did Christopher Columbus reach America? Ships. And how did the ships move? With wind. So we said, first, wind was the dynamic force, and then pass over different sectors. Okay? And who were the agents?
Se escucha.
Who were the ones that globalized? Countries globalized. And they globalized for what, Julieta?
For resources or power?
For resources, for empires, yes, expansion. Okay? So this is the first era. And the agents are the country. You went global through your country. It was very difficult for a person living in Italy to become global. You have to do it through your country. Now, the second year of globalization, he calls it globalization 2.0, and which is the period? Okay, so the 19th and the 20th century. That is the second. Now, what about the size of the world? From medium to small. Again, what made this world even smaller? Increased connection, communication. Now, which was the dynamic force? The railway and telecommunication. He says at the beginning, because this spans 2 centuries. So at the beginning, the railway and the steamship was during the 19th century, but then in the 20th century, there were developments in telecommunication. So now people move or connected, yeah, through the internet, for example, the telephone, yes. So telecommunications to agree the second part. And who were the agents of globalization?
Companies.
And companies were the agents, and they're globalized for what? Looking for what?
Market.
For markets, labor,
resources.
yes, the companies were the agents of globalization. Not just the country. Within a country, many companies would get globalized. And this was possible thanks to the falling cost in connection. Now traveling was cheaper than before, and communicating was cheaper than before. And that allowed for companies to be able to seek for markets, for resources, for labor somewhere else. Okay? At the very beginning, it was quite expensive. Yes, to cross the ocean, for example. And what about era of globalization?
Globalization 3.0.
Globalization 3.0. Okay, and what is the period?
From 2000 up to the
Very good. From the 2000 up to the present. Now, size of the world?
from a small size to a tiny size.
Very good. From small to tiny, so more and more connections. Yes. Very good. Now, which is the dynamic force?
Internet.
Individual.
Computer.
Very good. The computer, internet, the flatteners. Yes, that he mentioned at the beginning of that video,
Yes.
I think. And then, who are the agents of globalization?
Individuals.
The individuals. It is the individuals, yes, the ones that go global. It's not that countries are not important. It's not that companies are not important. They continue. Yes. The thing is that now, in this flat world, because this is the era of the flat world, it is the individual that work that is in power. Yes, to compete, connect, collaborate. Okay? Very good. So, now that you have this drama of the eras of globalization, and that you know how Scholti defines globalization, how Friedman defines globalization, here you have a question. To what extent is globalization a new phenomenon? Yes? And here you have arguments for both perspectives. And you get Nelson that says Einstein. Yes? Now, arguments that says globalization is a phenomenon. What can you tell me? What argument can you give? Let's say, no, globalization is new because of this. Okay, because the spread of sovereign territoriality is not something that existed in the 15th century. Yes, the spread of sovereign territorial relations is something that characterizes the now full-scale globalization. So, if you come back to Scholti, this era, yes, that is happening now, is that this growth of superterritoriality, this is new. So if we understand globalization as the spread of superterritoriality, well, yes, globalization is new. Yes, it didn't exist before. Very good. What other argument can you give me to say globalization is new?
Built around the individual.
Okay, and what else?
And the flattening of the world.
Okay, if we understand globalization as the flattening of the world, again, that is new. Okay, because this flattening of the world, if we look at these different stages, started in the year 2003. Okay, so this flattening of the world, yes, this growth of connection and this empowering of individuals is something that characterizes this of globalization. Okay? And this is very important, and what I will give you this advice in a minute. So we could say globalization is new because of the spread of superterritoriality and the flattening of the world. Those two developments are right. And they are the two definitions of globalization that add new insight to the development of contemporary. Now, globalization is not new. What can you tell me?
Because we could say that people have been trading for centuries.
Very good. So we could say, and we come back again to the other eras of globalization. You could say, well, globalization is not new because trans-world connectivity and trade is not new. It has existed. So if we understand globalization as trans-world connection, not as separate territoriality or the flattening of the world, but connections of people between countries or across the globe, that is not new. Yes? And then you can choose if you follow or you can mention the different eras of globalization according to Scholti and according to Friedman. So these connections are not new. In fact, for Scholti, they started before the 19th century with the growth of this emergence of this global imagination, and it started with Friedman, according to Friedman, with the discovery of America. Yes, and you can Spain. So that would be the first era. And there is another era of globalization. Yes, this is incipient globalization for Scholti and globalization 2.0 for Friedman. Okay? So that way you say, well, of us is how would you define globalization? In the contextualization here, you have to define globalization. So how would you define globalization for this question?
Depending on the stance.
What?
Depending on the stance.
Very good. You can have a general definition of globalization or a definition with a particular stance. So, if you define globalization in your contextualization as separate territoriality, you cannot say then that globalization is not new. Because if you understand globalization as separate territoriality, it means that for you, globalization is a new phenomenon. So pay attention not to contradict yourself. Okay? Then, if you understand globalization, or you define globalization as transport, connectivity, people, etc., well, that is a more general definition. You can take any instance. But if you define it as the flattening of the word, or transport, or separate territoriality, we expect your stance to be this one. But because of your definition of globalization. So always pay attention to that. Okay? Very good. And now we will continue. We are going to work with some sources. Yes, we can analyze them together. Yes, but we can scan them so you have access to this. Okay. First, what can you say about this? What is your opinion of this? What do you think?
Negative.
Negative? Inequality? So, why inequality? What is it showing? And think about what you read about globalization. Okay, this is related to what you said? No? Or Julieta? Yeah.
No, I'm also thinking that in the picture, the white boy has a phone, and the other boy doesn't have one, so maybe it also references disconnection from what is happening in this case, maybe in the global south.
Okay.
Maybe there is interconnection in the global north, but the global south is disconnected from it.
Okay, and this is related to the fact then you tell me which author says this, but it says that globalization is not universal. It's not that everybody in the world is globalized. There are those, yes, who are globalized, and those who aren't. So he says, well, globalization can connect people anywhere, but it doesn't mean that it connects everyone. Yes? So this is one of the things in relation to globalization. Not everybody is globalized. Some people are more globalized than others. So in terms of region, we could say the North, or Eastern Europe, East Asia, the United States, Australia. Those regions are more globalized, territorially speaking, than others. In terms of income, who are more globalized? First world countries, or even here in Argentina. We're not a first world country, but there are people who are globalized and others who aren't. So who are the higher class? The upper classes, the wealthy people, yes, the ones who have the resources are more globalized, yes, than the poor. And in terms of gender, according to what the author, men usually tend to be more globalized than women. Okay, now who is the author that refers to this? Okay, Costa Picasso mentions this, that the ones who don't have access to technology, yes, are left behind, yes, do not participate in this process. And who else? Scholti. Yes, Scholti in his modern position, he says there is globalization, but not everybody is globalized. Yes, he says globalization is not universal. Not everybody is globalized. Very good. Let's see the following. This one. What can you see? What is the opinion here? Whose ideas?
seems to be a call center,
Okay.
and the people seem to be from South Asia.
Okay.
And that makes me think of Friedman's idea of how people are competing, the individual is competing in the job market worldwide.
Very good.
Yes. Well, and now we get to colonialism because it's cheaper to pay
Okay, so
wages.
actually, well, the
Vamos
people
a
in
que
the
su
picture
opinión
look
siempre.
quite happy. They are posting, so we can say that maybe for them it's positive. For us, I don't know, but there was a time that outsourcing, working for a company in another country being paid in dollars, well, it was much better for us, economically speaking. Yes, because of the exchange rate.
But at the same time, the rates that the American employers would pay to people working abroad are not the same as the same wages that they would pay American citizens
Okay,
living
of
in the
course,
US.
maybe that was a win-win. They paid cheaper, yes, but for us, it was more than we are here. Okay, so it always depends on the perspective. Some people say, well, outsourcing is positive because you can access, many of you maybe study to be translators, so this maybe opens you markets, yes, work that otherwise would be very difficult. In that case, that would be positive. Many people, some people would say, well, that is negative because you are imposing this American model because usually it's America, yes. They outsourcing people, imposing this, and maybe they speak English to communicate in this call center, okay, and you might question that. The thing is that in the picture, they look up. Yes, so we imagine that for them, they were the way. We don't know. So it's related to Friedman. Very good.
Is it also related to the flattening of the word?
Yes.
Because they are physically together, let's say, but they are working for...
So apart from the flattening of the word, that is what she said. She said people are connecting, competing, collaborating from here, and maybe they are in a call center but working for the United States. Yes, this flat work. And apart from that, it's transword communication. It's subculturality as well. Because you have somebody in India communicating with somebody in America, for example. Yes? So Scholz's idea could also make differences. Now, let's see this one. What can you tell me about this one? Okay, this is a football fans watch on the giant screen Qatar World Cup. Yes, this is the World Cup.
And this also makes reference to the policies that she speaks about. But we were discussing about the
Okay.
Formula One race.
Very good. What we're discussing about Colorado, but this is in relation to
Yes.
here is 1080 people, different parts of the world watching the same match instantly. Okay? Then this could be this one. Brexit, yes. Very good. We have the European Union and the flag. What can you tell me? What is the position here?
The nationalism defeated globalism. That nationalism defeated globalism.
Okay, globalism but not globalization. What is globalism? And actually Trump, in one of his addresses to the people, Trump said globalization is not globalism. He said that it's again globalism, not globalization.
Like the tendency towards, like it's not the process, but the tendency towards like going global.
Okay.
Cooperation, that should also mention, he was against the idea of having like an organism that would concentrate.
Supranational. Okay. So globalism has to do with that, giving too much emphasis to the global and disregarding the national. Yes. So globalism has led, yes, globalism could be one of the negative consequences, if you wish, of globalization, because this has led people to question this and has led to the emergence of these different nationalisms. Yes? Because remember that globalization should be about reducing borders, people moving trading, okay, freely, but with nationalism we see that walls are being built, so people cannot enter. Yes.
We can say also that this is happening now in the US with Trump.
Oh, yes, this is an example, and not only in the US, in many parts of the world, nationalism, yes, are emerging again, yes, and many people say, well, this is a reaction to globalization, and this emphasis on the global, too much emphasis on the global, had led people to react, yes, and to build walls to protect their nations. And when you build walls, the emphasis here is on the territory. And we say that globalization today is not a territory. So again, here you see this reaction against globalization. And actually, Scholti criticizes globalization. Yes, they are raising this position in relation to it. Then read the quotes. Yes, they are about deglobalization. It's related to this. Yes, we have a slowing down. Yes, of globalization or a decrease in global connections as a reaction to globalism. Then read the quote, and this is the last one. This is related to ecology. And what can you tell me about this?
Are those the LA fires?
No,
Okay.
no, these are not new. But it's a fire. Yes, and what can you tell me? Because there are fires in Australia, fires in
Does it have to do with deforestation?
Sorry?
Is it related to deforestation and how companies burn down all this
Could be related to deforestation and what else?
and the creation of, being able to use that territory or that space for creation of companies or.
Okay, it's related to the exploitation of natural resources. And what else? What is in ecology? What is the issue today? Climate change. So maybe this is related to climate change. Climate change is associated with global warming. Global warming has to do, or is a consequence of the use of exhaustion of resources and the emissions, yes, of carbon dioxide into the air due to the capitalist model of production, yes. And what's interesting about ecology or climate change today, and this is something that Friedman said. What does he say about the world? The world today is not just flat. The world is also fused. So he said, something that I do here to the air affects somebody living somewhere else. So that is showing you that climate change is important. Because what the United States does, what China does, yes, in their production, yes, will affect the other countries. And in fact, this is seen with acid rain, because acid rain is the product produced because of different chemicals, yes, in the air. But the thing is that the factories here, you produce the chemicals, they go to the cloud, but then the cloud move. And that acid rain doesn't fall over the factory, but somewhere else, affecting something. Okay? And that's why we are what I do here to the air, to the climate will affect somebody. And usually, yes, the ones who produce these emissions are the most powerful countries, but the ones suffering are the yes.
And also that's not the other way around for the solution. What we do here does not have an impact in the
As
whole
if we have.
fusion.
Very good.
So solutions should also be fused, and we're only treating climate change locally.
Very good, and that's why Friedman says we need global governance. We need global governance. We know that global governance is important, but there aren't global governments that are able to create these measures. Well, they tried with the Paris Climate Agreement, but if one of the most important countries is producer of this emission withdraws from this, well, maybe we cannot find immediately other solution. Okay? But that is for you to do.
Encima tipo unos días antes era 82.
A mí no me están felices a mí.
A mí ahora. ¿Qué diferencia uno?